And that's how you know things are really ramping up here in Birmingham. And both of them are soon going to be kicking off right now. They are just figuring out their mulligans, and we will be heading over soon. But we are going to be seeing the different ways that Amethyst can interact with those other ink colors. So we are going to see how Emerald can react with the Amethyst and also how Steel. But Steel obviously featuring cards like Pete right now. Very, very useful, stopping some of the actions.
Yeah, absolutely. Jonathan on Amethyst Emerald. We did see it in action a couple, in fact, in the previous round, taking down Ruby Sapphire, but it's going to be a little bit more of a slow match here. Jonathan, again, we saw the Amethyst Emerald player against Ruby Sapphire being quite quick with the questing, but in a matchup like this, it's going to be a real battle of the Amethyst cards. It could be quite a long, drawn-out game, and that's the beautiful thing about both of these decks. They have the flexibility to go for a different game plan, and we are going to see Jordan kicking things off here. Elsa into the Inkwell, Chernobog's followers down on the board. And I would have to say, Ed, these are my two picks for kind of like most what I would call mid-range decks in the game, where they're so flexible, they can be quite quick, and I think it's going to be a really, really high skill level game we're about to see, as Clarabelle is the first card on the board for Jonathan.
You're absolutely right. Seeing some of these early plays right now with the one costs, knowing that we're definitely going to be seeing Clarabelle later on coming in and being a very dominant presence. That's one of those set 5 cards that people have very much been enjoying. And by the looks of it, we're going to be seeing that coming in this match from Jonathan. We see the snake come down there for Jordan, bouncing back the Chernobog. And then we go straight back over to Jonathan there, who's then going to quest.
Yeah, one lore each. One lore apiece. Of course, Jonathan could do something similar. If they have the snake in hand, they could ink and play a snake of their own, and then it would start to feel a little bit like a mirror match. But of course, both players on Amethyst, but Emerald for Jonathan and Steel for Jordan, but it is going to be the mirror. Jordan questing with that Chernobog's followers, bouncing it back. Jonathan questing with that Clarabelle and bouncing it back, and it's back on over to Jordan. Of course, can ink this turn, getting them up to 3 ink on turn 3. It's going to be a magic broom into the Inkwell, and out comes the library.
Aha, one of those set 5 cards that we are seeing played by pretty much every Amethyst player right now. A very, very useful location, and we know it's definitely going to start seeing more and more play throughout the weekend. That combined with some of the other locations like Queen's Castle, pretty lethal.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Jordan decides not to quest with the Madam Mim snake here either, perhaps wanting to move it into the library next turn. And therefore, if Jonathan was to quest with their snake, Jordan could just spend 1 ink, move their snake into the library, and then take the trade, but draw a card for their trouble. But in comes Merlin Crab, and suddenly 6 damage can be dealt by the Madam Mim snake. But Jordan now readies up. And will we be seeing this snake move over into the library, taking that challenge to draw a card, essentially spending 1 ink to draw 1 card? That is pretty efficient. Bell Accomplished Mystic could be a really tasty card in this matchup, and Jordan's just drawn into it.
When it comes to Amethyst, what would you say is the spiciest card that you've seen played so far? What's the unexpected card in an Amethyst combo that you think can actually give you the advantage?
It could be this Bell. I think in this game, Jordan's just drawn into it. It's, of course, closed deck list. It's not a card you tend to play around. And we did see someone earlier using Bell to move 1 damage counter from their own card to remove a Mother Gothel, and that was huge. And we are going to see the Chernobog's followers move into, go into the Inkwell, and that 1 ink spent on the Madam Mim snake, moving to the library. Another card drawn for Jordan, really utilizing the power of the library there.
We can see we've got a Baboom in hand there for Jordan as well. So Pete being on the board there, just making sure that no actions get played. And still quite a good amount. Like you say, we've got the Bell in hand, and we do have the Madam Mim Fox ready to go at any point with Jordan. And then if we see there on screen right now, Jonathan's hand, we do see the Mim, we see the Clarabelles.
Yeah, Jordan's Pete's given Jonathan's actions the red card for this turn, but Jonathan doesn't even have any actions available. So not getting the best possible value out of Pete, but of course, being that 3-cost character, it could be an ideal target to sing Friends on the other side down the line.
Absolutely, and also in something like this, it's best just to try and stop them. You may not know that they definitely have them in hand, but sometimes it's not worth that risk. Sometimes you just have to maybe, quote unquote, waste the Pete just to try and make sure that you've got that little bit of security.
Yeah, Jonathan spends 4 ink on a Merlin goat. So they've got a Merlin crab down on the board, which quested for 1, and that Merlin goat, in fact, sorry, it traded into the library, but Jonathan now on 2 lore, as is Jordan. So 2 lore each as it stands. I think the player's just double checking everything's okay with that. And it's going to pass back on over to Jordan, who, of course, went first in this game. So when you're the player going first in game 1, you really don't want to start off with a loss, because then you're really going to be in danger of losing this one 2-0. And if you're Jonathan, if you can get the win in game 1 here, then you've got the opportunity to go first in game 2 to potentially get that bonus point. So really, really high stakes. Every point matters at this stage. You're looking to get around 45 points over the 9 rounds of Swiss. So a win here would put each player within touching distance of that top cut, guaranteed almost for day 2.
Absolutely, and you know that a lot of these people have in their mind as they make their way towards those top cuts that they might have their chance to represent at the Euros later this year. And you know that everyone is trying their hardest to get that. Not just trying to get their hands on some wonderful prize cards, and boy, are there some wonderful prize cards. I think a lot of people are wanting to be part of that Euros experience.
We do see the Madam Fox on the board now for Jordan, another card which could sing friends on the other side down the line. The hand currently for Jordan is the Bell Accomplished Mystic, that Baboom, as well as a Queen's Castle. And Queen's Castle, when paired with Steel, Queen's Castle was considered one of the best cards in the game. We just haven't seen it that much today, a little bit overshadowed by the library. Well, Jordan's got both the library and Queen's Castle in their deck. And I think with the control of Steel, that could be a really good way for this mid-range Amethyst Steel deck to really build into and try and protect those locations with big control cards like the Fox, the Booms, the Bells. It seems like an interesting way to build the deck from Jordan. I like it, what I'm seeing so far.
Absolutely, and you're right in that we haven't really seen an awful lot of Queen's Castle, despite how really quite strong it is in its current lineup, but it is very easy to misplay that card, played at the wrong time, where your opponent has a lot of ways to get rid of it. For instance, you know, Madam Snake has 3 strength, so that's already doing almost half of the damage. So if your opponent has too many cards in hand, too many cards on their board, it's actually just not a smart idea to do. We're now seeing Jonathan get some more ink in there, and then we got straight into Merlin Crab.
Yeah, Clarabelle going into the ink world. Clarabelle, a card I find quite an interesting inclusion in Amethyst Emerald, because while it can pop off in a big way, I think it's fair to say that Amethyst has plenty of card draw, even without that Clarabelle. But the fact that it's a nice inkable option just gives Jonathan that luxury of putting it into the ink world, despite being a rather valuable legendary card. Jordan, of course, having gone first, is going to have the slight advantage in ink if they continue to ink each turn. But in comes a rabbit for 4 ink, draws into a snake. And I do believe they're still able to ink this turn. Could see that Baboom being tucked away, bounce the rabbit back. And these Amethyst mirror matchups can often be a bit of a battle of the rabbits. How many times can you bounce that rabbit back and forth and start gaining the advantage in card drawn? And Jordan with that rabbit now starting to really gain an advantage in terms of cards in hand.
Absolutely, and this is where hopefully Jonathan can start ramping into that Clarabelle light on her hooves, because that's the sort of thing that you're assuming he's playing that if he's going straight in with, you know, the 1-cost one. But that's exactly what you need to make sure that that card advantage that is gathered by some of those Amethyst cards actually becomes kind of immaterial. Yeah. Because you'll get all of those back at the end of your turn.
Yeah, it's a really interesting point, because I think Clarabelle as a card is probably most strong against Amethyst. Amethyst doesn't really have a way of keeping its card count low. For example, Sapphire, to counter Clarabelle, you can use your Fishbone Quill, tuck all your cards away, and then draw with Flaversham during your turn and disrupt the Clarabelle. But Amethyst just draws lots of cards. Jonathan did ink that Clarabelle in the previous turn, and maybe they're living to regret it after seeing Jordan play a rabbit shortly thereafter.
That's very true. And you can see in a lot of these matches, because the pressure is on, you've got lights, cameras with the knowledge that you're being watched by hundreds, if not thousands of people. And that's definitely adding some of the pressure. And you cannot misplay in these feature games. You should not do that. Not only because of how it'll make you feel, but because you have to think very far ahead, especially when you're actually playing two similar colors.
Yep.
You need to be sure, because you'll know the sort of plays they're going to do, because you know the cards as well as they do, hopefully. You've got to think ahead.
First time I'm seeing this Mother Gothel card played on the main stage here. It's a new Emerald Floodborn character, and Jordan is going to have to bounce a card back to their hand. Jordan gets to choose and does decide to bounce back. I believe it was a snake into their hand, keeping that Manamim Fox ready and waiting on the board.
Again, you can just always making sure that there's time there. I think they were just double checking something. And now we move straight back into Jordan, who's going to ready those up and move into the draw. And what is that we've got? I'm trying to see if I can see on our screen. Cannot make it out. But we will find out in mere moments, I'm sure. It wasn't Strength of a Raging Fire, was it?
Yeah, I'm not certain either, but that rabbit is back in the hand after bouncing it back. And Jordan could go for the rabbit, but they are running into that risk, as you mentioned, of that Clarabelle. Clarabelle could really punish Jordan here. While Jordan is spending all their ink drawing cards, Jonathan could just spend 7 ink in a single swoop with the Clarabelle and draw up to 6 or 7 at once. It really can be that impressive when Clarabelle works. Now, Bell considered to be inked by Jordan, but it's such a nice trump card to have up your sleeve and just catch your opponent off guard. So I wonder if Jordan's just wanting to hold on to it for that reason, but does decide to get rid of it. And now Jonathan knows there is maybe the threat of more bells in Jordan's deck, having seen that first copy. Chunderbox bounced back into hand by Jordan instead of bouncing the rabbit, perhaps fearing that Clarabelle.
Oh, it was Strength already.
It was Strength. 3 damage is going to be dealt to the crab. The crab removed from the board. And it was sung by the fox as well, so not spending any ink at all, but being able to remove your opponent's character is a really, really strong play.
The strength of a raging fire.
Very nice.
I can't compete with Baker. I'm not even going to try.
I haven't got that in my locker, I have to say. Jonathan's got a Banzai and a Goat in hand, which both could come down. I believe 6 ink exactly available. Goat and Banzai would cost 6. There is one more card tucked away into the left of the hand. It looks like a Lyle Tiberius Rourke as well.
Which is a very good card to be having right now.
Yeah, do you know what? That could be a bit of a game changer in this matchup.
Hugely.
Definitely one of the big advantages Emerald might have over Steel is the power of Lyle. Jordan could have removed the Lyle with Strength of a Raging Fire, perhaps, but that Strength of a Raging Fire is, of course, now in the discard pile. So Lyle could be nice and safe right now. It is going to be the Goat for Jonathan for 4 ink. 2 ink remains. Banzai and Lyle are the cards in hand, both uninkable, of course.
Yes, that's a slightly worse situation to be in, not having anything to just add to those resources, but we are going to see it come down there.
Yeah, Banzai with that 3-2 stat line, quest for 2. Jordan has a very similar card in Steel, of course, which is going to be Mr. Smee, but Mr. Smee is inkable.
Yes, Monsieur Mouche, famously inkable.
Mother Gothel questing for 2. Jonathan's making a really nice start here, starting to creep ahead in terms of lore. Jordan did look like they started to have that card advantage. But it's not only a fight for the amount of cards in hand, but also fight for board control. But that is a great card for Jordan. One of the best tools in these Amethyst Steel decks is the ability to sing with a rabbit. And then along came Zeus, and there it was, damaging the Mother Gothel, but she still remains on the board. It's also going to take the Manamim Snake to clean up the Mother Gothel.
I will say something that we are seeing in quite a lot of these feature matches is a lot of a battle of attrition for control of the board.
Yep.
And that is important, don't get me wrong. But we have seen a couple of these feature matches where, as a result of focusing on the board, nobody is questing.
Yeah.
Nobody is making any leeway when it comes to trying to actually win the game. So right now, seeing Jonathan actually start to creep ahead and increase that gap is probably one of the things that's going to help. Jordan is doing a great job of getting rid of Gothel and things like that, But right now, the focus for Jordan should probably be on trying to make quite a substantial board, not only that's pretty defensive, but one that's actually going to be able to close the gap. And we are going to see Lyle Tiberius Rourke come down, which obviously probably quite useful right now because we want to make sure that the opponent is losing lore when you're this far ahead. That's going to be quite good, but it's definitely going to discourage Jordan from using any of those songs. I don't know if Jordan has in their deck anything like Grab Your Sword, something that's just going to sweep a bunch of them at once, but something like that would be quite useful.
Well, funny you should say that, Ed, because Jordan has not drawn into a song, but the Tinkerbell has just been drawn by Jordan. That could start to put the board control back in their favor. Jonathan also had the option of playing the Ursula Deceiver alongside the Lyle, but instead deciding to add it into the Inkwell. It's going to be the Rabbit for Jordan for 4 ink, of course allowing you to draw a card as well.
Was that another Madam Mim Fox that came to hand from the draw? I think it was. Oh, back-to-back, another draw. Very good.
This rabbit has bounced back and forth for Jordan, and the Madam Mim, one is going to remove a goat, the other is going to remove a Banzai.
Ooh, but that's going to lose him both of his lore there.
Yeah, 2 lore lost thanks to Lyle Tiberius Rourke, and that is the power of Lyle in a longer game. But the Mr. Smee also comes down. Jonathan, while in a strong position in terms of lore, only has a single card in hand and a single card on the board. But imagine if it's Clarabelle. It's going to be Ursula Deceiver, and it's going to miss. Ooh. It's a Tink and a Rabbit.
But at least now Jonathan has the advantage of knowing what's going to happen, and at this point should just try and, you know, utilize Rourke as much as possible, just get some extra lore, knowing that because of that move that Jordan just did, that Jonathan now has an even bigger gap. There is an 11 lore gap now. At first it was just about 6 or 7, but it has really moved because not only did Jonathan gain lore, Jordan lost it, all because of Rourke. And I actually do think Rourke is a card that some people are sort of sleeping on actually in this format. I do think it's a really, really versatile card. You want to do something to really, you know, affect the player who is focusing too hard on maybe dominating the board. You want to try and punish them for that by taking their lore away. And
there's the Tinkerbell, and the Smee could also challenge into Lyle.
There it is.
And Lyle has been removed. Jonathan took that quest for 1 and has been punished by that Tinkerbell, which they did know was in hand. Still top deck mode though. A Clarabelle right about now would be tremendous, but it's a Banzai. Ed, I want to go back to one of the biggest decisions in this game. It was around turn 5. Jonathan put that Clarabelle into the Inkwell. And ever since then, it was the turn after Jordan went for that Rabbit.
We've not seen it since, have we?
And Clarabelle has just not been drawn by Jonathan ever since. And it's going to be really tricky to gain enough cards in hand. Tinkerbell removes the Ursula, removes the Banzai. Jonathan, no cards on the board, no cards in hand. Jordan is 20 lore away, but suddenly...
Oh, here we go. Now we're talking.
Double Lawrence, double Rabbit, and a Tinkerbell.
That's a board. That's a board right there. The double...
There's the Clarabelle!
We were waiting for this! It's taken 20 minutes to find that Clarabelle, but there it is!
But Jordan played round at the perfect moment. They just emptied their hand in the previous turn. No cards in hand, no cards drawn by Clarabelle. She arrived at the absolute worst moment to the party.
This is just, as you were saying it, that was obviously the moment that they drew it, but it's not enough. Look at that. Look at this gap closing right now.
Jonathan was 12 lore to 0, but suddenly Jordan questing for a total
of 8.
That's
great. That's a great round there for Jordan. So, Clarabelle is now there, and that's all good, but like you say, it might just be a little bit too late.
Jonathan's drawn into another card which draws them, which is Friends on the other side. Has the option, of course, of singing it with Clarabelle. But in this position, Jonathan might want to just start trying to remove some of Jordan's questing power. They might want to quest on their own, but of course also has the option of singing with Clarabelle. So 3 real options here. You could challenge, you could quest, or you could sing.
Who would you go for if you were currently in Jonathan's position? What would you try and take down? Would you go for Tink, or would you go for... Okay.
I'd go for the Tink, I think. And that is what Jonathan goes for. I think the Tinkerbell just posing too much of a threat. The fact that Clarabelle remains on the board after that is good. Spends 3 ink on Friends. So he still has 4 ink to play with and finds a set championships, if I'm not mistaken, Ursula Sea Witch Queen. I think that's what it is.
I think it is. Certainly is. And there it is, displayed in all its glory. Thank you for that, Jonathan. It's almost like you can hear us. Oh, and it's been inked.
It's going to be Mother Gothel. It's a 2-cost card, but you can spend 3 ink extra to bounce a card back into your opponent's hand, and it's going to bounce the Lawrence into Jordan's hand. And of course, 1 card in hand for Jordan means an extra card drawn off Clarabelle. Jordan currently 2 cards in hand, I believe. So Jonathan going to draw 2 cards thanks to their Clarabelle.
That's very, very useful for Jonathan, and actually quite well navigated there. I will say Lawrence is a pretty lethal card to have when it's got no damage. Does it gain 3?
2 lore it is, but it gains 4 strength.
Sorry, yes, that's what I meant in terms of its strength. So yeah, it's a 2 lore,
which puts it
for 2,
even out of the range of Medusa, which is just tremendous.
It's just crazy, and that's when it's undamaged. So if you can find a way, even if you were to tink it in another one, you'd still be able to take that away. But it's just so lethal.
Jonathan is still ahead, 12 lore to 9. Had a really good turn, just slowing Jordan down previously. But Jordan still with that library on the board and 3 characters as well, can rack up lore very, very quickly.
With the Elsa in hand as well.
It's going to be Lawrence. Not only can Lawrence quest for 2, but they can also sing Friends on the other side. 2 more cards drawn. It's a go and another Tinkerbell. And this Clarabelle already damaged.
Do you sacrifice a rabbit for it? Yep, that's exactly what you do, and you get a draw off it as well. Clarabelle can no longer activate that effect, which means Jonathan is now going to be deprived of resources. Jordan can happily fill up their hand here with cards, and we can see exactly what's going on. Another Lawrence. The Lawrence that was bounced back to the hand in that previous turn comes straight back down.
Yeah, we also saw the rabbit drawing that extra card because it was in the library, and in comes a foil goat.
Is that what that is? It's very dark on our little screen.
It absolutely is, but that's going to be another lore gain for Jordan. Jonathan's still in the lead, 12 lore to 10, but for how much longer? Well, the answer is not much longer at all as Jordan continues to quest. 12 lore to 11 as it stands.
Can we take a moment to just acknowledge that this went from a 0 to 12 or 0 to 10 game, now an 11 to 12 game in a matter of turns. That is how quickly this stuff can change. A lot of people get very discouraged if they're in a position of 0 to 10 or 0 to 12, but just look at this. This is why you should never ever worry about it, because anything can happen. You can slow down your opponent, but right now, actually, look at Jordan's board compared to Jonathan's. Jonathan does not have, whilst he is 1 ahead right now, the amount on display. Let me just do a quick bit of mental arithmetic. 2, 4, 6, 7 lore right now.
I don't think it's mental if you say it out loud.
It's still mental. I counted it without using my fingers.
Okay, we'll take it. That's fair.
So there's 7 right there. 7 are able to be quested once we get into the next game.
Yeah, and remember, Jordan did go first in this one, and it does look like that's going to be the end of game 1.
Yep.
Jordan takes it on Amethyst Steel, 1-0 up against the Amethyst Emerald. Really, really interesting first game, but of course the roles will now be reversed. The player who went first in game 1 will now be going second. And it was Amethyst Steel that went first in game 1, so it's now going to be the time of Amethyst Emerald to go first.
Of all the Amethyst combos that we are likely to see throughout this entire weekend, and in fact in this meta, which would you say is the most mainstay? Obviously, Baker would say Amethyst Ruby.
Yes.
But, and frankly, for a long time, that's been a very consistent deck. But obviously, we're seeing 2 different kinds of Amethyst combos here. Which would you say is most likely to have the staying power?
Good question. I would say probably Amethyst Emerald, because I do think that deck fell off quite a bit in set 4 due to Bucky. But I think now that Bucky's not around, it's just been such a good deck for so long. And I think it's probably one of the most represented decks here this weekend. Ruby Amethyst has always been great, but if you look at the new additions it's had this set, and even in the previous set, there's not that much. Whereas something like this Amethyst Emerald deck is making so much use of new cards. I think the Banzai, the Mother Gothel, the Clarabelle.
Clarabelle's the big one.
Really did get a lot of extra juice. Right, let's have a look at the mulligans. I can see, remember, it's Jonathan going first, and I can see a Banzai, which would be an interesting option on turn 2. Jordan has one of my favorite new cards, the Mickey Mouse Food Fighter, with the best flavor text in Disney Lorcana. That's right, the best flavor text in the whole of Disney Lorcana.
This is your hill, I see, okay.
The Mickey Mouse flavor text is underestimating him is a recipe for disaster.
Oh, brilliant.
Yes.
Okay, exquisitely done. I can see why you like it so much. I am also noticing Ursula as well in Jonathan's hand, which, against something like Steel, probably quite useful. Well, it's probably something that you can use, but I think you're right. Banzai's probably a good one to throw in turn 2.
Yeah, and
get some of those lore on the board.
Jordan could mulligan away their songs. Now that it's game 2, they know what Jonathan's playing. And therefore, Jonathan might be less interested in holding on to that Ursula. But Ursula's a good card to just hold on to regardless. Whether you ink it or you play it a little bit later on to try and discard something, it could be a big deal. Jonathan just inking 2 cards, not a huge deal. Jordan did just wait for Jonathan to announce how many cards they're mulliganing. The player going second does have the right to wait for the player going first to mulligan. You get a tiny little bit of extra information. It's these kinds of small things which can definitely make a big difference at the very highest level.
You're absolutely right, and that is something that you learn the more and more you watch things like Disney Lorcana Challenge and see some of these quite top-tier players, ones who have been working their way through some of their locals and other kind of competitions and even other Disney Lorcana challenges. It's very interesting to see the different levels of play that you see at this game. And bear in mind, we have thousands of players taking part in this Disney Lorcana Challenge this weekend in Birmingham, and that's not all. We've also got Las Vegas that's kicking off today as well. So this is one heck of a weekend to be watching Disney Lorcana.
Clarabelle into the inkwell, Clarabelle onto the board. It's a great start for Jonathan. Of course, this card's not a spectacular 1-drop, but it is representing the potential to shift onto for just 5 ink to get that Clarabelle in nice and early. That legendary Clarabelle, often the start of the show for Jonathan.
Absolutely, and it's something that we did see a slight, I wouldn't say blunder, but just maybe misfortune in the previous game where we didn't get to see that Clarabelle. Perhaps Jonathan can keep their card out just a little bit longer on this one. We see another Banzai come down there as well for the second turn.
Yep, Jonathan with the first lore of the game, up to 1 lore. It's back on over to Jordan now with that Chernobog's followers already down. While Jordan doesn't have Banzai, they do have Mr. Smee, which is quite a similar card. It goes into the inkwell and onto the board. Chernobog's followers, Chernobog's followers removes the Clarabelle from the board instead of questing and drawing a card. So Jordan really respecting the threat of that Clarabelle shift, wanting to get rid of it as quickly as possible.
You can even tell, no matter what stage of the game you're at, it might be the first handful of turns, it might be the mid-game, it might be the late game. These players at this level really have to consider everything they're going through. And there is that Ursula, which I said was likely to happen. And there goes Strength of a Raging Fire off the effect. So actually a very good use of Ursula there by Jonathan, just to get rid of one more extra little bit of spot removal.
Yeah, you're always really happy when you play Ursula and it hits, and really sad if you play Ursula and it misses. So I often say the worst amount of songs to have in your hand against an Ursula is 1. Because if you've got 2, you maybe get to hold on to 1. But if you've only got 1, it's of course getting discarded. So Jordan, a little bit unfortunate. They did ink a Smee on the previous turn, having seen Jonathan ink an Ursula Deceiver. I wonder if Jordan should perhaps have just been a little bit more safe, certainly with hindsight, and inked that Strength of a Raging Fire instead.
Probably would have been sensible, but I guess we now see what happens here as we see Broomstick go down, and then Monsieur Mouche is going to quest for 2.
Yeah, 2 lore on the Mr. Smee.
Now already Jordan's trying a slightly different tact than they seemed to do last time, which Jordan spent more time focusing on the board rather than on the lore.
Yep.
Less lore, more bore. It's not quite, it doesn't quite work, but I'm still working on it.
It is going to be the Madam bouncing that Smee back into hand and rushing in to remove the Banzai. So it's only Ursula left on the board for Jonathan. 3 ink to play with, but of course can ink a card, ink spell to go up to 4. And I wonder what it's going to be. Well, it's a rabbit. No surprises there. One of the most powerful 4-cost characters in Disney Lorcana. As Ursula quests, meaning Jonathan does have a slight early lead, 4 Lore to 2.
We only have 18 minutes on the clock at this point, which can show you just how long a single game in a 2-game Swiss can take, especially if you're trying to be cerebral, trying to control that board, instead of just having quite an aggro deck. Sometimes these things can take a little bit of time. What was drawn off that rabbit? Did we get a chance to see?
I did not see just yet, but it is going to be Smee and the Mickey Mouse. Remember, underestimating him is a recipe for disaster. I'm sure Jonathan will not underestimate the Mickey Mouse, but we'll have to wait and see. It is back on over to Jonathan. I think they just need to ready their Ursula still. There's a rabbit in hand, there's a Clarabelle, there's a Madam Mim Snake and a Madam Mim Fox. So lots of card draw options for Jonathan.
These are the moments we talk about, these moments where you sort of feel the calm before the storm, where you have to be cerebral, got to think about each and every moment. There comes another rabbit, so we're going to get another draw. And what did we get?
Crab on this occasion.
Crab on the draw, okay. And we do have the Clarabelle light on her hooves in hand, but admittedly, we don't have some of those lower class Clarabelle either in the hand or on the field. So that's going to be less of a useful thing right now, but it will happen at some point. Just, I guess now it's figuring out which cards to utilize in the Inkwell.
I think it's a really interesting decision. We saw Jonathan in the last game ink Clarabelle, maybe regret it a turn or two later. Right now, it looks like Clarabelle's not going to do much of anything, but I think just having that option in hand could be valuable. Having said that, the snake's great, being able to draw cards off the rabbit, but Jonathan this time, perhaps learning from the previous game, decides to hold on to this Clarabelle for a little bit longer, and just in case it comes in useful.
So right now we see in hand for Jordan is a crab. That's going straight into the Inkwell, and we do have, I believe that's a library.
Yep, 3 ink for the library, 2 ink to move both Mickey and Smee into the library.
Very good.
Both characters quest, and suddenly Jordan takes the lead, 5 Lore to 4.
We are seeing a very different approach from Jordan this time. He's realized there that the last round was spend way too much time on the board. So now it's just about get some cards out, get some defense up. And at this point, whilst you are trying to quest, the fact that you've got library on the board means that it's really going to divide some of the attention of Jonathan's cards, which is going to make things a bit better. We've just seen Jonathan there singing Friends on the Other Side with the Merlin Rabbit, drawing 2 more, and we are seeing a Mother Gothel there.
Yep, the 2 cost and the Floodborn, so 2 ways of bouncing cards back to draw Jordan's hand. This library with 8 willpower is not easy to deal with. There is a Fox in hand, which can rush in and deal 4, but you would still need 4 more damage in order to remove it. So it was an option for Jonathan to challenge with both rabbits and the Fox, but that is no longer an option as one of the rabbits has already sung Friends.
What about the Ursula? How much?
Just 1 damage on Ursula, so you'd only sink in a total of 7. Crabs and things like that could help out, but I do wonder, Jonathan, if they could have considered, certainly a different option was challenging that Queen's Castle with the rabbit instead of singing Friends.
Yeah,
yep, going to draw another card. It's going to be a goat this time off the rabbit.
Now, is Jonathan going to try and go for the library with the cards on board right now? How much ink does Jonathan have left over?
Looks like 2 ink remaining.
Oh, now 3.
Yep. It's going to be the Floodborn Mother Gothel into the Inkwell. And it's going to be a crab. Okay, suddenly I've eaten my words.
Oh!
That is how you do it.
Wow, very
No
good.
need to challenge with the rabbit when you've got a Merlin crab ready and waiting to go.
Now, do you try and use that rabbit to just get rid of Shmee here? Yes, you do. That's exactly what's going to happen. You'll get a card off that and remove something that can quest for 2 each turn. So actually quite useful, just enough to slow Jordan down a bit and also give Jonathan a small card advantage. So actually a very good move there from Jonathan.
Yep, 3 ink spent on Friends on the Other Side for Jordan. They're going to draw a couple of cards. Crab, Baboom. Is it 2 Babooms and a crab in hand?
Because of the constant flicking,
Yes.
I actually can't tell. No, it's Shmee.
Okay.
Mr. Shmee, Monsieur Mouche.
So Mickey Mouse staying ready and waiting. Of course, ready characters can't be challenged, but I think this turn from Jonathan with the crab removing the library was a pivotal moment. Jordan a little bit starved of card draw. We talked about it being often a rabbit battle. Well, Jordan has not got a rabbit anywhere to be seen just yet, but that can all change very, very quickly indeed. Speaking of rabbits, it's a rabbit of Jonathan's own.
And we've got a goat off the draw. There was a moment where there was some consideration about playing the Gothel there, because Jonathan does have, I believe that's 6 or maybe 7 lore ink, pardon. And that as a result means, there we go. And there's no
songs.
No, there is a Baboom, and at this point, that does give Jonathan, even though no targets were hit by that, it does give you an idea of what's going on in the hand. It's essentially Diablo there.
Yep.
You do get to just see what's happening in the hand.
Yeah, and that also maybe helps Jonathan make a more informed decision over what to quest with, what to ink. So information definitely vital. It's going to be a quest with the crab, a quest with the fox as well for a total of 2. Jonathan back in the lead now, 6 lore to 5, I do believe.
And right now, the positions have been sort of reversed here, because now Jonathan has quite a formidable looking board here, whereas Jordan is still with a Mr. Shmee and a recipe for disaster.
I have to say, it's a pretty good draw for Jordan. They found the Tink off the top. It is a 6-cost character. I believe only 5 ink in the inkwell for Jordan right now, but does have a couple, I think, a couple of Babooms in hand. Maybe it's just one. It is really hard to track Jordan's hand.
It is so hard. I feel like I'm playing Find the Lady. It's really hard.
I think it's 2 Babooms, but they fooled me before.
Is it not crab?
Yeah, you might be right. There's certainly a Baboom and a Tinkerbell, and there's one other card tucked away at the back.
Might see it. We might get, more than a frame to glimpse it at some point.
But the Tinkerbell for Jordan, while it's not removing anything immediately, it just puts the game in a very interesting state where Jonathan suddenly might not be that keen to quest, as Tinkerbell can remove 2 threats at once. Mr. Smee's going to start things off. It can quest for 2, but instead of questing for 2, it removes the fox from the board, which only quests for 1. In comes a crab. Underestimating him is a recipe for disaster. It's going to be Mickey, who does trade the crab, gets removed itself. But I enjoyed the Mickey. It was a pretty good performance from Mickey overall.
And then inking the Baboom there. So now 6 ink there for Jordan, setting them up next turn for that Tink.
Yep.
And now we head back over to Jonathan, who I believe has 7 ink available. So we could start seeing Clarabelle, although kind of pointless at this point because of the card advantage.
Yeah, Jordan with 1 card in hand, Jonathan with 5. It might even be a point where Clarabelle could be, but no, Clarabelle's still going to enter the board for 7. And here's the thing. Clarabelle, mainly we talk about her ability to draw cards, but she's still got an incredible stat line, 5 strength and 6 willpower, questing for 2. That is not a bad card at all to be able to drop at this point in the game.
You're right. I suppose it does just help with the board presence, but obviously the main effect that people remember Clarabelle for is definitely not going to be applicable here. But as you said, doesn't matter at this point. That is quite a now ever-expanding gap between the 2 laws and a much bigger presence on the board for Jonathan here. So Jordan, despite having won game 1, now has to try and really pull some things together. However, we know that the Tink is in hand, and now we've also got a Pete in hand for Jordan, but only one of those get played. So there's the Pete, just going to help things a little bit. Going to get rid of the rabbit there with the crab.
It's another card drawn for Jonathan when that crab, when the rabbit is removed. So Jonathan draws from the rabbit.
See what it was just yet, but we might.
And it looks like it might be back on over to Jonathan. So Jordan could have played the Tinkerbell, but instead deciding to go for that Pete, maybe hoping to find like a friends on the other side off the top.
There's another crab. That was what Jonathan just drew.
There is a couple of goats in hand for Jonathan as well as a fox. So Jonathan's going to start getting to that point. They're 11 lore away currently, where those goats can end the game before Jordan might expect it to happen.
Okay, so this is going to be interesting. Is there a Madam Mim Fox in hand? Yes, there is. So there could be a lot of bouncing going on here.
Ursula is going to challenge the Merlin Crab. Both cards are removed. Pete is given the challenger, which is not going to matter. Both players just give it a little smile. It is a trigger, which says, it doesn't say you may. It just says when this card leaves the board, something gains challenger.
True.
So good to see both players following the rules closely, even when it has no impact on the on the game in this particular instance, because there are some scenarios that can matter. Always good to follow the rules as closely as possible.
Right now, Jonathan is in a very good position because Jordan only has that one card in hand, and we know it is a Tink, which is actually going to do fairly little against things like Clarabelle and Banzai.
Yep. 2 ink spent on Banzai, a card which can quest for 2. Jonathan looking to get as much lore questing potential down on the board as possible. Just questing for 1 with Ursula.
Are we going to try and see a Madam M Fox come down? Surely not. Surely you'd want to get the goat down and then bounce with the Fox on the next turn.
Still a lot of ink to play with.
Oh, it was okay. That's the thing I thought that they were going to try and do. I would have personally tried to get the goat down just to try and get more lore, but let's trust Jonathan here. They might have a plan. Okay, there's the Tink.
We, of course, know the Tinkerbell's in hand. I suppose Jonathan doesn't have quite that same luxury.
No.
Just wanting to be really safe at this point. I kind of like it from Jonathan. I think it's not the best play in this position, but it's the safest.
It is true.
And I think that Jonathan is just feeling very, very comfortable at this moment in time that they can afford, instead of going for that goat
another
bounce.
Tink!
Okay, double Tink. And let's not forget, you can shift Tink onto Tink, which could, in the turn that follows this, be an option for Jordan. It's not something you see very often.
But it could be the only play at this point with only those 2 cards in hand for Jordan.
Yep.
And we'll look at that ever-widening gap, 5 to 12. There it is.
Jordan decides to play Tink. The other option was Tink. So I think it was probably not the trickiest decision of the day. 1 damage onto each of Jonathan's characters. And now the decision for Jordan is, will they quest with Pete? And they decide to do so, getting their first lore for a good old while. Jonathan at 12 lore, Jordan at 6. 2 goats in hand for Jonathan. So that 12 can turn to 20 very, very quickly. It's going to be a quest of Banzai, a quest of Clarabelle. That's 16 lore now for Jonathan. Do they have enough ink to play both goats as the Madam Mim quests up to 17?
I can see Jordan getting ready to maybe just extend that fist bump.
It's the Ursula shift to take the game.
There it is! Wow, what a game.
Set Championships, Ursula finishes it in style. Jonathan shows the 2 goats as well. Wow, what a way to finish the series.
Who doesn't want to see an Enchanted be the final card you play as you take a feature match here at the Disney Lorcana Challenge? Very exciting.